The winter air was sharp, like a blade. The wind swept across the plains, making the snow whirl in chaotic eddies, obscuring the outlines of the icy cliffs. The cave that the prehistoric people had found seemed their last refuge in this merciless world. Inside, it was dark and almost silent, except for the occasional creak of ice at the entrance, and the faint rustle of snow when the wind crept through cracks in the rock. There was no warmth of fire, no comforts of the modern world. There was only survival, only instinct, only the feeling of one's fragility in the face of nature. A man carefully stepped across the rocky floor, trying not to wake the others. His skin was weathered, cracked from constant exposure to the cold, and his breath came out in thick clouds. He held a recently skinned mammoth hide in his hands and carefully laid it in the depths of the cave. Here, against the stone wall, his family and close companions would gather to sleep. A fire was not lit. There was hardly any wood, and the warmth of their bodies was the only source of heat. A woman sitting by the far wall pressed a child close to her. The baby shivered but gradually got used to the cold roughness of the stone and the softness of the hides. She quietly hummed incoherent sounds, like a song that no one heard but herself and the night. There was something ancient in these sounds, something passed down from generation to generation, the ability to soothe oneself and one's children, even when the outside world seemed merciless. Every sound felt immense in this silent space. Every breath, every step, every creak of the hides under the pressure of bodies, everything was palpable in this frozen world. The man approached the entrance, checking for new cracks in the snow, for signs that predators had noticed their shelter. The cave was relatively protected, but it could not fully hide them from the world that lived its own relentless life. Ice on the cave walls shimmered, reflecting the faint light of the moon. Inside, however, darkness reigned, broken only by the weak light reflected off the hides and stones. The prehistoric people knew they could not waste energy. Every movement required effort, and energy was scarce. The night ahead would be long, and to survive, they needed to conserve warmth, save strength, and stay alert. They slept almost upright, pressed against one another. Their bodies were covered with multiple layers of hides. Occasionally, someone shifted, searching for a more comfortable position, briefly releasing a cloud of vapor that immediately dissipated into the cave's cold air. Sleep was fragmented, light, but necessary. Whenever one person stirred, the others reacted instantly, a survival habit honed over millennia. Stories passed down in whispers by the fire or in the complete darkness of the cave were part of their life. They told each other what they had seen during the day: mammoths, wolf packs, ice storms that destroyed everything in their path. These tales seemed tightly woven with dreams, with feelings of fear and wonder, with the understanding that the world around them was vast and incomprehensible, and humans were just a tiny but persistent part of it. Time here lost its usual meaning. Day and night merged into a continuous flow of wind sounds, ice cracks, and distant nature's moans. Hours and minutes were measured not by the sun but by breath, by body warmth, by the soft rustle of hides moving with every shift. Life and death coexisted too closely to allow for the luxury of deep sleep. When the first rays of the sun began to pierce the narrow cave entrance, revealing the sparkling snow and ice crystals, the people were still asleep. Gradually, as light penetrated the cave, they began to wake. Their bodies were tense, muscles stiff, but their spirit remained alive. Every morning was a new challenge, but also a small victory over the cold and hunger. And so, day after day, winter after winter, generation after generation, they learned to sleep, survive, and live in a world that constantly tested them. Their sleep was not just rest, it was a tool for survival, a way to preserve life in conditions where -40 degrees Celsius was normal and every night could be the last. The first light of dawn slowly filled the cave, reflecting off the icy crystals at the entrance. The cold that had dominated the night seemed to hold its breath, and for a moment, the world felt suspended between frost and fire. Slowly, one by one, the prehistoric people began to stir. The tension in their bodies from the long night eased just slightly, replaced by the low, simmering alertness that came from knowing survival demanded constant vigilance. The man who had been at the cave's entrance first exhaled a puff of warm breath, which mingled with the icy air. His eyes scanned the outer landscape before turning back to the group. The snow outside stretched endlessly, white and undisturbed, hiding both food and danger beneath its frozen surface. He could hear the faint crunch of ice beneath the weight of his own steps and the occasional distant howl, carried by the bitter wind. The sound reminded him of wolves, scavengers, or perhaps predators far larger and more dangerous. Every noise was a potential threat. Inside, the others began to move with slow, careful precision. Women untangled themselves from the layered hides, gently waking the children. The babies' cries were subdued, almost ritualistic, as mothers rubbed their backs and hummed soft, calming noises. This song of survival, passed from generation to generation, was as old as the ice outside and as essential as the fire they sometimes struggled to maintain. It was a language without words, a rhythm of safety in a world that offered little. The group's eldest, a woman whose eyes seemed to reflect the pale light of the cave, began to organize the morning tasks. She had survived more winters than anyone else and knew the value of each moment. She instructed the younger members to gather the animal skins and arrange them for warmth and comfort, while a few of the stronger men prepared to venture into the snow for food. The hunt was never simple. The world beyond the cave was a frozen wasteland, and every step carried risk, yet it was the only way to sustain life. Venturing outside meant confronting the cold in its most brutal form. -40 degrees Celsius was not merely discomfort, it was a constant, gnawing threat. Faces burned from the wind, fingers and toes grew numb, and every movement required more energy than one would expect. The hunters wrapped themselves in multiple layers of fur, tying strips around their wrists and ankles, covering every inch of skin. They carried simple tools, stone-tipped spears, and bone knives sharpened to a deadly edge. Their movements were deliberate, silent, and rehearsed through countless winters. As the group stepped into the whiteness, the landscape revealed its harsh truths. Tracks of animals lay frozen in the snow, some fresh, some old. Wolves, rabbits, and occasionally larger prey like reindeer had passed this way. The hunters followed carefully, eyes sharp, ears tuned to the faintest snap of ice or whisper of wind. Each step was a balance between stealth and survival. One misstep could alert the prey, or worse, reveal the hunters to predators. Inside the cave, those who remained prepared for the possibility of waiting. Women tended to small tasks, like repairing worn clothing from the previous hunts, or reshaping hides to retain warmth. They were adept at making the most of the materials nature provided, stitching and weaving without modern tools, guided only by instinct and knowledge passed through countless winters. Children watched and learned, understanding that every action was a lesson in endurance, every small skill a chance to survive another night. Back outside, the hunters spotted a small herd of reindeer. The animals' breath steamed in the cold air, their movements cautious. The men crouched low, using the contours of the frozen landscape for concealment. Their bodies were tense, every muscle poised for sudden movement. The hunt was a dialogue between predator and prey, a silent negotiation of life and death, played out in the vast, frozen silence. The strike was swift and coordinated. One hunter distracted, another aimed, and the spear flew with precision. The struggle was brief but intense, a testament to the harsh education of survival. Blood mixed with snow, a stark reminder of the cost of life in this unforgiving world. They butchered the animal carefully, taking nothing for granted. Every piece would serve multiple purposes: meat to eat, hides for warmth, bones for tools, sinew for binding. Waste was not an option. The environment allowed no indulgence. As the hunters returned to the cave, carrying their prize, the rest of the group prepared to welcome them. The warmth of the cave seemed less about temperature and more about the gathering of bodies and shared effort. The children reached out, fascinated by the raw reality of survival, their eyes wide with curiosity and reverence. The adults shared silent looks of understanding. Another night survived, another day begun. Food was divided, skins adjusted to retain warmth, and the cave once again became a sanctuary, albeit temporary, against the relentless cold outside. The people rested in shifts, aware that the night would return with equal ferocity, and that survival was measured in endurance, cooperation, and an intimate understanding of the frozen world around them. The sky outside gradually brightened, but the sun offered little warmth. Shadows stretched long across the snow, hinting at the stark, unyielding expanse beyond. Within the cave, life continued in rhythms older than memory, cycles of preparation, hunting, rest, and vigilance. Every breath, every movement, was a testament to resilience. Every heartbeat was a quiet victory over the icy wilderness. Night began to creep upon the cave once more, the pale light of dusk retreating under the heavy curtain of the winter sky. Inside, the group huddled together, layers of hides pressed tight against their bodies, seeking warmth in proximity, and in the silent understanding that they were safer together. The wind outside howled like a chorus of unseen spirits, shaking loose fragments of ice that rattled against the cave walls, creating shadows that danced and twisted in the dim light. Every shadow, every sound carried weight, every sense was heightened in the cold, dark hours. Sleep came reluctantly, a shallow, watchful state rather than true rest. Minds were filled with memories of past hunts, encounters with predators, and glimpses of the frozen wilderness outside. Occasionally, a child stirred, crying softly in fear or discomfort, and the sound rippled through the cave, eliciting careful murmurs and gentle touches. The adults had learned to soothe with minimal movement, conserving heat while reassuring the young. Each lullaby, each low hum, was imbued with a knowledge older than the cave itself, an unspoken understanding that survival depended as much on vigilance as on warmth. Dreams, when they arrived, were strange and vivid. Some saw themselves running across endless plains of snow, chasing or fleeing from enormous creatures whose shapes shifted in the icy haze. Others dreamed of fire, of endless nights without frost, or of distant forests filled with fruits and animals unfamiliar yet tantalizing. In these dreams, the mind wandered beyond the physical boundaries of the cave, into realms where fear and hope intertwined. Waking from such dreams was jarring, the cold air seared skin, and the reality of survival pressed down like a weight, reminding every sleeper that the world outside was indifferent to desire or imagination. Outside, the winter storm had begun to intensify. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets, carried by gusts that seemed almost alive, battering the cliffs and forcing drifts against the cave entrance. The group listened as the storm roared, a ferocious symphony of ice and wind, The cave, though shelter, offered only partial protection. The cold seeped through cracks, carried by the breath of the storm, reminding them that even the sanctuary was fragile. The elders exchanged glances, silent communications honed over decades. They knew the storm could last for hours or days. They knew the hunt would be delayed, that food stores were precious, and that every scrap must be rationed carefully. Stories emerged in whispers, tales of past winters, of storms that had lasted weeks, of nights when the cold had crept in despite their best efforts. These stories were both cautionary and comforting. They reminded the young of danger and taught them resilience, while reassuring the adults that they were not alone in enduring the harsh world. Movements in the cave were minimal. The group shifted occasionally, redistributing body heat, pressing hides against one another, adjusting positions to avoid numbness. Fingers and toes grew stiff, yet the warmth of close contact allowed survival through the night. Occasionally, someone would venture near the cave entrance, briefly peering into the blizzard, sensing the pulse of the world outside. The storm distorted the landscape. Shadows of snowdrifts created illusions of shapes moving just beyond sight. But the hunter's eyes had been trained to see the subtle signs of prey or danger, even in such conditions. The storm also brought with it a strange kind of illumination. Light reflected off the snow in uneven flashes, casting surreal patterns on the cave walls. To the prehistoric mind, these lights were not merely reflections. They were signs, portents, or messages from forces beyond comprehension. They inspired awe and fear in equal measure. Some of the younger children pressed their faces to the hides, murmuring soft questions to their parents about the dancing shadows. Answers were given in soothing tones, but always with an undercurrent of respect for the unknown, for the world outside the fragile cave walls. In the deepest hours, the cave became a theater of contrasts. The cold pressed in from every side, threatening to pierce even the thickest hides, while the warmth of bodies and shared presence created islands of life. Breaths mingled in misty clouds, synchronized with the quiet hum of low murmurs, occasional sighs, and the soft scraping of repositioned limbs. Every sound, every movement became amplified in the stillness, creating a sense of intimacy and vigilance simultaneously. By the time the storm began to wane, small signs of weariness appeared in the group. Yet, despite exhaustion, there was a persistent alertness, an instinctive knowledge that the day ahead would demand careful navigation, renewed hunting efforts, and the continued negotiation with the unyielding cold. Survival was cyclical, day to night, hunt to rest, storm to calm, and each cycle left traces in body and mind, shaping the people, their skills, and their understanding of the frozen world around them. The first rays of pale sun eventually penetrated the swirling clouds outside. They revealed a transformed landscape, white and glimmering, with the storm's remnants lingering in frozen sculptures and drifts. For the cave's inhabitants, it was a reminder of the relentless, unchanging rhythm of life in the extreme cold. Survival was never guaranteed, but knowledge, cooperation, and endurance ensured that they could face another night, another storm, and another day in this unforgiving yet awe-inspiring world. The storm had passed, leaving the landscape outside glimmering under the pale light of early morning. Inside the cave, the group stirred again, but this time, the movements carried a different rhythm, a sense of calm, tempered by awareness. The night's harsh lessons lingered in the stiffness of their limbs, and the lingering chill that clung stubbornly to their skin, yet the shared ordeal fostered bonds that were as tangible as the layers of hide that kept them warm. The eldest woman gathered the children in a small circle near the central cluster of hides. Her voice, though soft, carried authority born of decades navigating winters far harsher than any recent one. She pointed to the tracks left in the snow outside the cave entrance, explaining in gestures and sounds the meaning of each mark: a rabbit's delicate paws, a fox's erratic path, a larger creature whose weight pressed deep into the frozen ground. The children listened, wide-eyed, absorbing not just information but the rhythm of survival encoded in every motion. Nearby, the younger adults prepared for the day's hunt. They sharpened their tools, checking spear tips and binding edges with sinew, a process as much ritual as practical necessity. The movements were precise, learned through imitation and practice, yet interspersed with quiet laughter or teasing remarks, signs that even in the harshest conditions, human connection persisted. One man passed a sharpened blade to another with a subtle nod, an unspoken promise of trust and shared responsibility. In this small community, each action mattered, each relationship was a safeguard against the indifferent world outside. Meals were simple but communal. The meat from the previous hunt was divided carefully, ensuring that even the smallest children received sustenance. The preparation of food was a silent performance of coordination and respect. Every cut, every portion, was deliberate, honoring both the life taken and the need to survive. Children watched intently, learning not only techniques but the reverence woven into each gesture, the understanding that survival demanded skill, patience, and gratitude. Stories were told throughout the day, not merely for entertainment, but as vessels of memory and instruction. Elders recounted hunts long past, moments when the frost had been so severe that even the heart of a sleeping child had threatened to succumb to the cold. They spoke of storms that had lasted for weeks, of creatures encountered, of mistakes that had taught lessons in caution and ingenuity. These narratives were layered with emotion, fear, awe, triumph, and through them, knowledge was transmitted seamlessly across generations. Children internalized both the practical skills and the moral lessons embedded within each tale, learning how to move, when to act, and how to remain calm under pressure. Within these interactions, emotional bonds deepened. Parents and children, hunters and gatherers, elders and novices, all were interdependent. A glance, a touch, a whispered instruction could prevent injury or death. Mutual care was instinctive. Each person's survival reinforced the others. The cold, ever-present and merciless, became not only an external challenge, but a crucible that strengthened social cohesion. Loneliness was lethal. Companionship was survival. As the day progressed, some ventured near the cave entrance to observe the world shaped by the storm. The snow had rearranged itself into new patterns, ridges, drifts, and hidden hollows that would either conceal prey or conceal threats. Scouts walked lightly, leaving minimal tracks, their eyes scanning, interpreting, anticipating. Every movement was deliberate, every breath measured. The knowledge of the land, encoded in memory and practice, allowed them to navigate and survive where instinct alone would fail. Inside the cave, women continued their meticulous tasks. Skins were cleaned and stitched, bones were carved into tools, and small crafts were fashioned not merely for necessity but for preservation of knowledge and culture. Even in these harsh conditions, there was a rhythm to life that transcended mere survival. Patterns, repetition, and ritual reinforced identity and continuity. The act of creating, of maintaining, was as essential as finding food, for it connected them to the past and prepared the next generation for the future. As evening approached, shadows lengthened once more. The group gathered near the center of the cave, sharing warmth and preparing for another night. Fires were stoked cautiously, smoke allowed to drift toward the cave's opening to minimize suffocation. Conversations were quiet, measured, and filled with care, warnings of potential dangers outside, reminders of positions during the night, and gentle guidance for the children. Here, in the flickering glow and shared closeness, survival and humanity intertwined seamlessly. Even as darkness returned, the group remained vigilant yet comforted. They had faced the storm, learned its lessons, and adapted. Bonds strengthened, skills reinforced, knowledge transmitted, and trust affirmed. Each individual was a thread in a tightly woven tapestry of resilience. In the frozen wilderness beyond the cave, death and danger were constant. Inside, life endured, sustained by cooperation, understanding, and the unspoken recognition that no one would face the night alone. Days passed in a rhythm dictated by the frozen landscape. The world outside remained indifferent to human presence, its snowfields and ice ridges stretching endlessly, untouched and unyielding. Inside the cave, life followed cycles of preparation, action, and recovery. Each day brought the same challenges but required different strategies, as the snow, the wind, and the creatures that roamed the plains altered subtly, constantly testing the group's adaptability and resilience. Hunting became both necessity and ritual. The men ventured into the blinding whiteness with sharpened spears and an intimate understanding of the terrain. Every step was measured, every motion deliberate. Snow could conceal both prey and predators. A single misjudgment could result in injury or death. Their senses, honed by years of survival, detected the faintest sound of movement under the snow or the barely visible tracks left by small creatures. Tracking was a language, a conversation between hunter and environment that required patience, observation, and intuition. The women and children, remaining in the cave, turned their attention to preparation and preservation. Skins were meticulously cleaned and stretched, sinews twisted and stored for tools, and bones sharpened into implements for hunting or crafting. Each task was performed with precision and mindfulness, transforming mundane labor into a form of survival artistry. Children learned not only by instruction but by observation, absorbing the lessons of endurance, care, and focus. Every cut of the blade, every stitch in the hide, every knot tied in sinew carried meaning beyond immediate function. It was knowledge being passed to the next generation, a repository of wisdom accumulated over countless winters. The psychological dimension of survival was as significant as the physical. Fear was constant, a presence that hovered at the edge of every thought. The storm outside could return without warning. Predators might approach while the group slept. Hunger and exhaustion pressed against the mind and body. Yet these fears were tempered by ritual, community, and routine. The act of working together, of sharing food, of telling stories and singing low songs, created a buffer against despair. The elders' narratives became a kind of armor, their cautionary tales reinforcing both knowledge and emotional resilience. Night after night, the cave became a theater of vigilance. Positions were taken, shifts rotated, and bodies pressed together to conserve heat. Dreams carried fragments of the day's experiences, visions of hunts, the shimmer of distant ice, the rush of predator and prey. They were reminders, warnings, or even rehearsals of scenarios that might come to pass. Children learned to interpret these dreams as well, internalizing strategies for survival and understanding the fragility of life. As winter progressed, the challenges intensified. Snowdrifts grew, concealing the movements of animals and the contours of the land. Hunting required longer journeys, sometimes venturing to the edge of known territory. Energy had to be carefully rationed, as a misstep could cost both warmth and strength. Yet each successful hunt brought more than sustenance. It reinforced confidence, strengthened the bonds of cooperation, and provided material for tools, clothing, and bedding that would carry them through the coldest nights. The cave itself became a microcosm of life's necessities and possibilities. The placement of hides, the arrangement of bodies for warmth, the careful maintenance of the fire, all were acts of strategy and adaptation. Conversation, often in hushed tones, conveyed critical information, lessons, and warnings. A subtle glance or touch could redirect a child, alert a companion, or signal the presence of danger. Every movement had purpose, every word carried weight. In the frozen world beyond, even the smallest error could be fatal. Inside, survival was cultivated through mindfulness, skill, and interdependence. Seasons shifted slowly, imperceptibly at first. The white monotony of winter gave way to slightly longer days, hints of thaw along the edges of snowfields, and the quiet anticipation of new challenges. The group adapted with instinctive awareness, altering hunting patterns, adjusting clothing and shelter, and preparing for a world that remained unforgiving but subtly transformed. These transitions tested knowledge accumulated over generations and demanded flexibility in thought, planning, and movement. Through all of this, the emotional fabric of the group deepened. Relationships were reinforced by shared struggle, trust, and care. Fear, respect, and affection intertwined seamlessly, creating a social network as essential as any tool or weapon. The harsh world outside demanded not only skill but empathy, as each individual's survival was tightly bound to the well-being of others. Strength and resilience were measured collectively, not individually, and this understanding became the unspoken rule governing daily life. Even in the rare moments of calm, the landscape inspired awe. Snow glittered under weak sunlight, wind-carved ice formations shimmered like crystal sculptures, and the vast horizon stretched infinitely. These sights were reminders of both fragility and power. Humans were small, yet their ingenuity, cooperation, and accumulated knowledge allowed them to endure. Every day in the frozen expanse was both a test and a lesson in patience, observation, and the delicate balance between fear and hope. The cave was quiet now, a fragile sanctuary against the relentless cold. Yet within its walls, each mind was alive with currents of thought and emotion. The eldest hunter, sitting near the flickering embers, replayed the events of the past days over and over in his mind. The hunt had been successful, but a moment's lapse had almost cost him dearly. His fingers traced the edge of a spear tip, and he thought about how easily frostbite could take him from this world, or how a misstep in the snow could separate him from the group forever. Yet alongside the fear, there was satisfaction, a deep, somber pride in having survived, in having contributed to the tribe's continued existence. A young mother cradling her child felt a mixture of exhaustion and vigilance. Every sound made her heart leap. The faintest whisper of wind at the cave entrance sent her hands moving instinctively to shield her baby. She thought of the generations before her, women who had endured similar nights, and she drew strength from that lineage. Yet worry gnawed at her mind. What if the storms became stronger? What if the next hunt failed? The uncertainty of the frozen world pressed on her constantly, shaping her every action and thought. Children, meanwhile, experienced the cave differently. To them, the harshness of cold and scarcity existed alongside wonder and curiosity. Tiny hands explored hides and tools, eyes traced the shadows cast by flickering embers, and ears strained to catch the low hums and whispers that filled the air. Their dreams were vivid, of running through endless snowfields, of glimpsing creatures that existed only in the imagination, of moments when warmth and safety were absolute. Yet upon waking, the stark reality returned, frostbitten hands, numb toes, and the ever-present need to follow lessons imparted by their elders. These lessons were absorbed silently, becoming part of their instincts before they could even articulate them. Even the youngest hunters carried hidden burdens. The responsibility of bringing food to the group weighed on their minds, a mix of pride and fear that had no parallel in the simpler joys of childhood. Each journey into the snow was a negotiation between courage and caution. They thought constantly about wind direction, animal tracks, and hidden dangers. The line between life and death was thin, and every choice mattered. Mistakes could mean injury, starvation, or separation from the safety of the cave. The psychological weight of the environment pressed even on the elders. A sickness that swept through one of the group members, a mild fever that could become lethal in the cold, became a matter of intense concern. They knew they could not afford errors. Medicine was primitive, and survival depended on careful observation, patience, and improvisation. Fevered bodies had to be warmed, weak bodies had to be fed, and the entire group adjusted its routines to accommodate vulnerability without compromising the safety of all. These moments were crucibles for decision-making, highlighting the delicate balance between care and necessity. Sleep, when it came, was never complete. The mind remained partly alert, interpreting dreams as possible warnings. A shadow might be a predator, a noise might be the shifting ice, a strange shape outside the cave could be a guide or a threat. Yet the subconscious also allowed for glimpses of hope, visions of abundant prey, sunlit valleys, and warmth beyond the cave. These dreams were lessons as well as escapes. They taught strategy, courage, and foresight, preparing the mind for the challenges of waking life. Emotions ran deep, intertwining with practical survival. Moments of joy, sharing a successful hunt, watching a child master a skill, seeing a clear patch of sky, were fleeting yet intense, grounding the group in the beauty of existence even in a world dominated by hardship. Grief, too, was constant, the loss of a small animal, a failed attempt at shelter, or a member falling ill. Yet grief was tempered by the knowledge that life must continue. Each individual was both fragile and resilient, defined by their ability to endure suffering and yet act with purpose, sustaining not only themselves but the network of lives around them. The cave became a stage where these internal struggles unfolded silently. One could feel the subtle tension of suppressed fear, the quiet pride in small accomplishments, and the unspoken communication of reassurance and trust. A touch on a shoulder, a shared glance, a whispered word, these were as essential as food or fire. Survival depended on this emotional literacy as much as on physical skill. Without it, even the strongest bodies could not withstand the cold or the challenges of the frozen wilderness. As night deepened once more, the group huddled together, aware that the long hours ahead would test patience, endurance, and vigilance. The wind howled outside, battering the cave and forcing icy drafts through every crack, yet within, warmth persisted, born not just of bodies pressed together but of shared knowledge, mutual care, and the unbroken rhythm of generations who had faced harsher winters and survived. Each heart beat in quiet sync with the others, a testament to resilience, awareness, and the profound, unspoken understanding that survival in this world was never solitary. It was a collective endeavor, as delicate and essential as the breath of life itself. Years passed, each winter as unforgiving as the last, each season testing endurance and adaptability. The cave remained their anchor, a refuge against the vast, indifferent wilderness. but life outside demanded constant vigilance and growing skill. Children who had once clung to their mother's sides now ran along the edges of the snowfields, learning to track footprints and sense subtle shifts in the wind. They absorbed the language of survival almost unconsciously, how to interpret the whisper of falling ice, the direction of animal trails, the rhythm of predator movement hidden beneath layers of snow. The elders observed these transformations with quiet pride and vigilant attention. Knowledge accumulated over decades became tangible through the children's actions. A young hunter learning to read tracks correctly reflected the lessons passed from one generation to the next. Each successful mimicry of elder techniques reinforced the continuity of survival strategies, ensuring that no wisdom would be lost even as seasons shifted and the old grew weaker. Hunting strategies evolved in subtle ways. Tracks left in early morning snow were studied for hours. Wind patterns were memorized. Distant mountains became markers for migration routes. The group developed shared rituals to synchronize efforts, signals through movement or sound, precise placements during ambushes, and the careful division of labor to conserve energy. Even minor errors were observed, corrected, and transformed into lessons for both individual and group growth. Survival was as much a mental and social endeavor as a physical one, and over years, the cave became not just a shelter but a classroom, a laboratory, and a sanctuary. Winter storms came with predictable unpredictability. Each storm was a new challenge, blizzards stronger than any before, ice layers forming treacherous surfaces, the wind carrying piercing cold through every layer of clothing. These trials tested not only strength but ingenuity. The group learned to reinforce cave entrances with stacked stones, to position bodies optimally for warmth, to ration food with increasing precision. Every lesson learned in hardship became part of their collective memory, whispered to the next generation as both caution and encouragement. The emotional lives of the group deepened with time. Bonds were strengthened through shared adversity and nurtured through daily acts of care. Elders taught younger members not only survival techniques but the subtle balance of patience, observation, and trust. A glance could signal readiness, a touch could reassure, a soft word could convey wisdom without distraction from the cold or the work at hand. Children grew up understanding that every interaction had consequence, that survival required empathy as much as skill, and that life in the frozen wilderness was defined by interdependence. The connection to the land deepened. Snow, ice, wind, and sun were not merely obstacles, they were guides, teachers, and companions. The group learned to read the world as one reads a book, the bending of trees, the glint of ice, the faintest track in fresh snow, all became part of a living curriculum. Survival was no longer brute endurance alone, it was observation, interpretation, and adaptation. Knowledge was inseparable from experience, and experience was inseparable from the emotional bonds that made each individual part of a cohesive, enduring whole. By the time the children had grown into young adults, the rhythm of life in the cave and the surrounding frozen wilderness had become both familiar and relentless. Each individual had begun to understand not only their own limits but also those of their companions. Leadership emerged naturally among those who demonstrated skill, awareness, and an intuitive understanding of both the environment and the dynamics of the group. Yet leadership was rarely enforced. It was recognized and respected because survival demanded cooperation rather than dominance. The young hunters, now fully initiated into the rituals and routines of the cave, tested themselves constantly. Some sought to prove their prowess through daring hunts, tracking prey through the most treacherous passes, navigating snowdrifts and icy ridges with precision. Others focused on refinement of skill, crafting sharper tools, improving shelters, experimenting with preservation techniques for food and hides. Competition existed but was tempered by necessity. Each member knew that a reckless act could imperil not only themselves but the group as a whole. Pride and survival intertwined in a delicate balance, shaping behavior and decision-making in ways both conscious and instinctive. Within the cave, relationships became more nuanced. Couples formed, alliances emerged, and subtle tensions arose over resources, responsibilities, and recognition. Elders mediated disputes with a combination of authority and experience, ensuring that conflict did not jeopardize the group's cohesion. Every interaction carried weight, a gesture of respect, a shared task, a word of warning, or a display of skill. All were mechanisms for negotiating position, trust, and influence. Emotional intelligence became as critical as physical strength. The survival of the group depended on both. Seasons continued their inexorable cycle. Winters arrived with predictable harshness, but the group had grown skilled at interpreting signs in the snow, the wind, and the clouds. They could anticipate storms hours or even days in advance, adjusting their routines, hunting strategies, and shelter arrangements accordingly. Summer brought its own challenges: scarcity of large prey, the need to store and dry food, the preparation of hides for winter. Each season demanded adaptation, and each cycle reinforced the accumulated knowledge of past generations. Storms remained tests of endurance. Even the most experienced hunters occasionally found themselves trapped in blinding snow, forced to dig temporary shelters or seek refuge under natural formations. Inside the cave, those remaining reinforced their positions, prepared extra layers, and tended to those returning cold and exhausted. The division of labor was fluid yet precise. Everyone understood the importance of timing, energy conservation, and support. Small errors could result in frostbite, illness, or starvation, yet the group's growing cohesion mitigated risk. The emotional landscape was as demanding as the physical. Losses continued: an animal that eluded capture, a companion injured by ice, a sickness that resisted improvised care. But each challenge reinforced resilience and understanding. Individuals learned to endure grief while maintaining function, to act decisively even under fear, and to balance caution with opportunity. These lessons became embedded in both memory and ritual. Songs hummed by the fire, stories told in whispers, and practices repeated daily formed a continuous feedback loop of experience and knowledge. Leadership was not static. The strongest, wisest, and most observant earned respect and influence. But even elders deferred to younger members in matters requiring physical agility or fresh perception. Decisions about hunting routes, shelter reinforcement, and risk assessment were made collectively whenever possible, blending individual skill with group wisdom. Those who attempted to assert authority through force alone were quietly marginalized. In this environment, survival demanded collaboration above ego. Over years, subtle cultural patterns emerged. The group began to recognize recurring natural phenomena: the migration patterns of prey, the behavior of predators, the formation of ice ridges and drifts. These observations were codified in stories, gestures, and practices, ensuring that knowledge was transmitted across generations. Rituals developed around hunting, preparation of hides, and the marking of seasonal changes, practical acts imbued with symbolic meaning. In doing so, the group reinforced both competence and cohesion. Even in the most brutal winters, moments of wonder persisted. The shimmer of frozen lakes under moonlight, the sudden appearance of a distant herd, or the quiet lull of wind through ice-carved formations offered reminders that beauty and danger were inseparable. These moments were celebrated subtly, with shared silence, a glance of recognition, or a quiet hum, reinforcing connection to both the environment and each other. The cave, ever the heart of life, witnessed the continuous dance of generations, children learning, young adults testing themselves, elders observing and guiding. Through storm, hunger, fear, and joy, the group survived, not because the world was forgiving, but because they had become attuned to it, responsive and resilient, capable of both understanding and acting upon the forces that surrounded them. Years had passed, and the cave had become not just a shelter but a repository of experience, memory, and wisdom. The first generation of children had matured into strong hunters and skilled gatherers, while the elders, who had guided them for decades, now moved with slower, more deliberate steps. Their eyes carried the weight of countless winters, storms endured, losses mourned, and lives preserved. Yet despite the wear of time, their presence was invaluable. They embodied knowledge, strategy, and the subtle understanding of a world where the margin between life and death was thin and ever-shifting. The stories told by the elders were no longer mere cautionary tales. They were chronicles of existence, a living history of survival. Each narrative was imbued with lessons about tracking, hunting, weather, and the behavior of animals, but also with philosophical insights, the impermanence of life, the inevitability of death, and the importance of cohesion and empathy within the group. Children and young adults listened intently, absorbing not just survival techniques but moral frameworks, emotional resilience, and the rhythm of life within the harsh world beyond the cave. Hunting strategies had evolved over decades. The group had learned to anticipate the subtle cues of the environment, shifts in wind, the tracks of prey, the behavior of predators, and to move with both precision and patience. Young hunters, guided by the elders' counsel, experimented with new techniques, tested the limits of their endurance, and occasionally innovated, discovering subtle efficiencies in tracking or tool use. Knowledge was cumulative. Each generation built upon the experiences of those before, refining methods, avoiding past mistakes, and transmitting wisdom that was both practical and philosophical. Inside the cave, relationships deepened with age and experience. Partnerships, alliances, and even rivalries were tempered by a shared understanding of survival stakes. Elders mediated disputes with subtle authority, ensuring that social cohesion was maintained even amid the natural tensions of limited resources, fatigue, and fear. Trust became a currency as valuable as any tool. A misjudged action, a broken word, or a failed duty could ripple through the group, influencing not just immediate survival but the collective memory of competence and reliability. Seasons continued their inexorable cycle. Winters remained harsh, yet the group had become adept at preparation. Layers of hides were meticulously repaired and augmented, food stores were rationed with precision, and temporary shelters were reinforced before the first blizzard arrived. Summer offered opportunities to observe animal migrations, gather scarce plants, and train the young in both observation and technique. The group had learned that survival was not merely reactive. It required anticipation, reflection, and adaptation over time. Evenings in the cave became moments of reflection and philosophical contemplation. By the fire, elders would speak quietly of the past, of companions lost, of nights when survival seemed improbable, of storms that had tested every skill and nerve. These reflections were not morbid but instructive. They reminded the group of their fragility, the value of vigilance, and the importance of empathy, cooperation, and respect for the world around them. Death was acknowledged as a natural force, ever present, yet life was celebrated through care, knowledge, and perseverance. Children and young adults internalized these lessons, not simply as instruction but as part of a worldview. They learned to observe patterns in nature, to anticipate the rhythms of life and death, and to find meaning in both endurance and vulnerability. Play became practice, mimicking hunts, exploring the cave's recesses, or experimenting with tools in a safe manner. Every action, every observation, contributed to a growing body of collective knowledge that would support the next generation. Illness and injury, though feared, were no longer sources of panic. The group had developed strategies to tend to the sick and injured, warming, feeding, immobilizing, and monitoring. Every ailment was an opportunity to apply learned knowledge, to innovate, and to reinforce social bonds through care. The cave became not only a shelter from cold but a sanctuary where life's fragility was managed and respected. As the first generation of elders approached the end of life, their influence remained profound. The younger adults honored their experience, consulting them for decisions, seeking advice, and learning the subtleties of timing, observation, and interpersonal coordination. Even in death, elders shaped the group. Their passing was marked with quiet rituals that honored both life and the wisdom imparted, reinforcing continuity and memory. The frozen world outside remained indifferent, vast, and unpredictable. Storms, predators, scarcity, and disease challenged the group continually. Yet the cumulative wisdom of generations allowed them to navigate these dangers with a sophistication that transcended mere instinct. Every decision was informed by decades of observation. Every movement, every choice, was shaped by lessons learned from winters past. The cave itself became a living testament to endurance, a space where memory, knowledge, and human resilience converged. Decades passed, and the cave, weathered by time, had become an intricate archive of human endurance. Layers of experience were inscribed not only in the minds of its inhabitants, but in the very walls and objects within. Scratches, faded marks, and arrangements of stones and hides told stories of hunts, storms survived, and seasons endured. For the youngest generation, the cave was both home and teacher, silently communicating lessons that were as vital as spoken words. Children born during the harshest winters now approached adulthood. Their bodies were stronger, adapted to cold in ways only long exposure could teach. They moved with an instinctive understanding of snowdrifts, ice, and wind currents. They carried memories encoded in action: how to crouch low against a ridge to remain unseen, how to interpret the subtle sound of distant hooves, how to use shadows to conceal presence. Each act was guided by centuries of observation distilled into tacit knowledge. Social structures had evolved subtly yet profoundly. Leadership remained fluid, recognized through a combination of skill, wisdom, and emotional intelligence. Elders, though physically diminished, retained authority as repositories of knowledge and ethical guidance. Younger adults balanced physical capability with decision-making, often consulting the elders for insight before attempting dangerous hunts or negotiating scarce resources. Alliances, both implicit and explicit, formed and reformed in response to tasks, threats, and opportunities, reflecting an evolving understanding of cooperation, trust, and social cohesion. Rituals had grown more complex. Ceremonies surrounding successful hunts, the arrival of new children, and the passing of elders became structured events, blending practical instruction with symbolic meaning. These rituals reinforced bonds, transmitted knowledge, and instilled a collective sense of identity. Even the youngest participants were taught their place in the cycle, aware that each action, however small, contributed to the survival of the group and the continuity of accumulated wisdom. Nature itself had become a teacher as much as a threat. The group read seasonal patterns, animal behaviors, and the subtle shifts of weather with an intuition honed over generations. Migration routes of prey, hidden paths across frozen ridges, and the indicators of approaching storms were all observed, interpreted, and remembered. Knowledge was now layered across individuals and time. No single person could contain all the insights, but collectively, the group formed a living encyclopedia of survival. Philosophical awareness deepened as elders reflected on mortality and the passage of time. Death was acknowledged as inevitable, a force as natural as the winter winds, yet the significance of life was reinforced through the care, cooperation, and teaching that defined daily existence. Stories recounted not only survival but meaning, the interconnectedness of life and death, the responsibility of one generation to the next, and the fragile yet persistent assertion of humanity against an indifferent world. Children learned that courage was not absence of fear, but recognition of it and action despite it, that wisdom was not knowledge alone, but the ability to integrate knowledge with empathy and foresight. Loss continued to shape the group profoundly. Each passing, whether from illness, accident, or age, left both grief and instruction. The young observed mourning, rituals of remembrance, and acts of care, understanding that continuity of life required both respect for the departed and readiness to assume responsibility for the living. Memory became both emotional and practical, a bridge linking past, present, and future. The cave itself had transformed subtly over generations. Hides, tools, and structures were layered, repaired, and improved with each passing winter. Fires were managed with precision to maximize warmth while minimizing smoke. Spaces were organized to allow communal gatherings, work, and care for the sick or injured. Every object, every arrangement, became part of a continuum, a physical manifestation of collective knowledge and resilience. Time was marked not just by seasons, but by milestones of growth, loss, and accomplishment. Children matured into adults capable of leading hunts, teaching younger generations, and sustaining the delicate equilibrium of life in the frozen wilderness. Elders, respected for experience and insight, guided subtly, their presence a constant reminder of the cycles that governed existence. The youngest learned not only to survive but to observe, reflect, and integrate the lessons embedded in both nature and human behavior. Amid this enduring rhythm, moments of beauty and reflection persisted. Sunlight refracted through icicles, casting shimmering patterns across the cave. Distant herds moved in graceful synchrony. Wind sculpted snow into ephemeral shapes that vanished with time. These moments were celebrated quietly, shared through gestures, songs, or simple, wordless acknowledgement. They reminded all that life was more than survival. It was observation, connection, and understanding of the profound interplay between humans and the frozen world around them. A new generation had come of age entirely within the protective embrace of the cave, never knowing life beyond its icy threshold except through stories, shadows, and lessons handed down by elders. For them, the cave was not just shelter, it was a universe, a school, and a community where the rhythm of survival was both constant and sacred. They had inherited a wealth of knowledge, tracking, hunting, toolmaking, weather interpretation, but also a profound understanding of the subtler currents of human interaction, empathy, and moral responsibility. Roles within the group had grown more defined yet remained fluid. Some specialized in hunting, tracking, and understanding animal behavior. Others focused on crafting, preservation of food, and the maintenance of the cave's infrastructure. A few became storytellers and ritual keepers, entrusted with transmitting accumulated wisdom to the youngest members. Leadership emerged naturally, often shared between elders and physically capable adults, guided by merit, observation, and emotional intelligence rather than authority alone. Decisions were debated, strategies tested, and experience honored, ensuring that the group functioned as a cohesive, resilient whole. Hunting had evolved into an art of patience, observation, and timing. Members tracked prey over miles of snow, interpreting subtle cues invisible to an untrained eye. The faint indentation of a hoof, the direction of broken twigs, the echo of distant movement across ice. Young hunters honed their skills under careful supervision, learning to predict animal behavior, anticipate storms, and conserve energy. Each hunt was both a lesson and a test, blending instinct with strategy, risk with necessity. Failure was instructive. Success brought not only sustenance but a shared sense of achievement that strengthened bonds and reinforced trust. Inside the cave, evenings were devoted to stories, songs, and quiet reflection. Legends of previous generations, triumphs over storms, clever hunts, and near misses with predators, were recounted with reverence. Elders wove philosophy into these tales, reflections on mortality, the cycles of life and death, and humanity's place within the larger rhythms of nature. The young absorbed these narratives, not merely as entertainment but as guidance, forming a moral compass and understanding the value of patience, caution, and respect for both human life and the natural world. Seasons dictated rhythm, but adaptation shaped behavior. Winters demanded careful rationing, layered clothing, and precise coordination during hunts. Snowstorms and icy winds tested endurance and ingenuity. Summers required observation of animal migrations, preparation of hides, and teaching of younger members. Each cycle reinforced skills, instilled resilience, and deepened the bond between the group and the environment. The landscape itself became a teacher. Every ridge, drift, and ice formation offered lessons in navigation, risk assessment, and strategic planning. Emotional depth continued to develop. Love, fear, grief, pride, and empathy were interwoven into daily life. Relationships were formed, tested, and strengthened. The care of children and the sick became communal responsibilities. Losses, whether of life or opportunity, were mourned but also integrated into collective memory, reinforcing lessons in vigilance, foresight, and adaptability. Each individual understood that survival depended on the group, and that strength without cooperation was meaningless in the relentless expanse of frozen wilderness. Philosophical reflection became increasingly important. Elders and young adults alike contemplated the meaning of life, the inevitability of death, and humanity's fragile yet persistent assertion against an uncaring world. The cave, storms, and seasons were more than physical challenges. They were constant reminders of impermanence, resilience, and the necessity of learning from both success and failure. The youngest members, guided by observation and stories, began to internalize these lessons, understanding that courage, wisdom, and care for others were as vital as physical skill. Over time, cumulative knowledge reached new heights. Tools became more sophisticated, hunting strategies more refined, and shelters better adapted to shifting conditions. Rituals preserved memory and reinforced social cohesion. Storytelling connected generations, transmitting not only survival techniques but moral and philosophical understanding. Life in the cave had transformed from reactive endurance to a sophisticated, adaptive culture, where intellect, emotion, and instinct coalesced in the daily act of surviving and understanding the frozen world beyond. Even amidst the harshest winters, moments of beauty and wonder persisted. Sunlight refracted through ice, illuminating the cave in fleeting brilliance. Distant herds moved with grace across snowfields. The wind sculpted patterns in drifts, ephemeral yet mesmerizing. These glimpses reminded the group that life encompassed more than survival. Observation, reflection, and emotional connection were as essential as warmth, food, and skill. The cave was both a refuge and a classroom, where the interplay of humans and nature, life and death, fear and joy, was experienced in full measure. Decades became centuries in the measured rhythm of the cave, marked not by clocks but by cycles of seasons, births, deaths, and hunts. Generations rose, matured, and passed, each leaving subtle imprints on the lives that followed. The cave had transformed into a living archive of experience, every hide stretched and repaired, every tool fashioned or sharpened, every arrangement of stones or firewood. These were physical manifestations of accumulated knowledge, a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of the human spirit. Children born into this world never saw life as separate from survival. The cave was their universe, and every stone, shadow, and echo carried meaning. Elders guided them not merely with instruction but through example, teaching patience, observation, and the delicate balance of risk and reward. The young learned to read the subtlest signs in the environment, shifts in wind that hinted at an approaching storm, the faintest tracks signaling prey, or the patterns of predator movement that could save or cost a life. Knowledge had become both instinctual and reflective, a shared consciousness that linked past, present, and future. Social structures had evolved in complexity. Leadership was recognized through skill, judgment, and empathy rather than coercion. Elders maintained influence as repositories of wisdom, narrators of collective memory, and arbiters of disputes. Young adults took on physically demanding tasks, innovating hunting strategies, improving shelters, and experimenting with new techniques for preserving food and hides. Roles were fluid, yet each individual understood that the survival of the group relied on cooperation and shared responsibility. Even subtle gestures, a nod, a glance, a shared glance at the tracks outside, conveyed critical information, coordinating action without words. Hunting had become an intricate dance of observation, prediction, and patience. The group interpreted snowdrifts, wind currents, and subtle movements of distant herds. Each hunt was both practice and examination, a test of accumulated knowledge passed down through generations. Young hunters learned the rhythm of the land, the timing of prey, and the necessity of conserving energy. They understood that success depended not on brute force alone, but on patience, empathy for the natural world, and seamless collaboration. Every failure became a lesson, every success a story to transmit to the next generation. Rituals flourished, blending the practical with the symbolic. Seasonal hunts, births, deaths, and the first successful solo hunts of children were marked by acts that reinforced cohesion, memory, and identity. Through song, story, and gesture, the group encoded wisdom and ethics, shaping both behavior and understanding. Stories of past storms, cunning hunts, lost companions, and near-death experiences became the moral and philosophical backbone of the community. The young absorbed these narratives, internalizing lessons about mortality, courage, and the delicate balance between life and the indifferent forces of nature. Time and reflection nurtured a philosophical awareness. Elders and adults pondered mortality, the impermanence of life, and humanity's place in the grand cycles of existence. Death was neither feared nor ignored. It was recognized as an inevitable force shaping every action, decision, and relationship. Life was measured not in years alone but in attentiveness, cooperation, and understanding. Every act, from tending a fire to sharing a meal, carried significance, weaving together the practical and the spiritual in daily experience. The environment became both teacher and guide. Snow, ice, wind, and wildlife patterns were read with precision and respect. The group learned to anticipate storms, follow prey migrations, and navigate dangerous terrain. Even the harshest winters became lessons in endurance, observation, and innovation. Knowledge was no longer individual, it existed collectively, embodied in ritual, practice, and narrative. Survival depended on memory, perception, and the careful cultivation of trust and empathy. Loss and grief were integral to life. Illness, injury, and the passing of elders reminded the group of fragility, yet they were absorbed into a continuum of understanding. Mourning was both emotional and instructive, reinforcing lessons in care, vigilance, and ethical responsibility. The group learned that resilience required acknowledgement of death alongside celebration of life, that strength was not merely physical but moral, emotional, and intellectual. Amid the trials, moments of wonder endured. Sunlight refracted through ice, creating transient mosaics on cave walls. Herds moved with silent grace across frozen fields. Wind sculpted snow into ephemeral art. These fleeting phenomena were observed, reflected upon, and remembered. They offered quiet inspiration, connecting humans to the cycles of the natural world and deepening awareness of the interplay between beauty, danger, and survival. Thus, life in the cave was a perpetual synthesis of endurance, reflection, skill, and community. Knowledge was inherited, adapted, and expanded with each generation. Relationships were honed through necessity, empathy, and observation. Survival was inseparable from morality, philosophy, and understanding of the wider world. The cave, the snow, the wind, and the herd, all were teachers, shaping not just the body but the mind, spirit, and the collective identity of humanity against the frozen expanse of existence. Centuries passed, and the cave had become more than a shelter. It had transformed into a crucible of human civilization in miniature. Generations succeeded one another, each inheriting not only skills and knowledge but also the collective memory of triumphs, failures, losses, and the nuanced understanding of survival in a frozen world. The walls bore silent testimony to this continuum: scratches, carvings, and carefully arranged stones marking events, accomplishments, and milestones of life. Children now entered the cave not as beginners but as inheritors of an accumulated wisdom that was tangible in every object, shadow, and whispered lesson. They learned through observation, action, and subtle guidance. Elders taught not only hunting and crafting but patience, empathy, and ethical reasoning. Every activity, tracking prey, tending fires, repairing tools, carried embedded instruction. Life itself became a curriculum, a training ground in which mind, body, and spirit were inseparably cultivated. Social structures had become layered and sophisticated. Leadership was acknowledged through merit and insight, balanced between age, experience, and physical capability. Elders retained authority in matters of strategy, ethics, and lore, while young adults executed the practical tasks that demanded agility, stamina, and innovation. Alliances, mentorships, and cooperative arrangements were subtle yet essential, ensuring that decisions accounted for both individual initiative and collective safety. Trust, reputation, and reputation management were as crucial as skill with a spear or an eye for tracks in fresh snow. Hunting had evolved into a precise and deeply strategic art. individuals interpreted subtle changes in snow texture, wind direction, and animal behavior. Observing the direction of distant herd movements, the group anticipated migration patterns, coordinated ambushes, and optimized energy expenditure. Failures were studied meticulously, transforming each misstep into a lesson for future generations. Successes were celebrated quietly but purposefully, reinforcing cohesion and transmitting tacit knowledge. The young learned that survival depended as much on observation, patience, and empathy as on speed or strength. Rituals flourished, blending the practical with the symbolic. Births, deaths, successful hunts, and the first solo excursions of adolescence were marked by ceremonies that reinforced collective memory, cultural identity, and ethical understanding. Storytelling became both entertainment and instruction, interweaving survival strategies, ethical reflections, and philosophical musings about mortality, time, and human place in the natural order. The young internalized these lessons, gradually forming an intuitive comprehension of cycles, consequences, and continuity. Philosophical thought deepened. Elders reflected on the impermanence of life, the inevitability of death, and the broader patterns of existence. Young adults pondered courage, moral responsibility, and the delicate balance between self-interest and the welfare of the group. Life was measured not merely by survival but by attentiveness, wisdom, and the cultivation of empathy. The cave, storms, ice, and the rhythmic passage of seasons became metaphors and instructors, offering lessons in resilience, foresight, and humility. Knowledge was cumulative, growing in sophistication and breadth. Tools were refined with new techniques, shelters were enhanced for efficiency, and hunting strategies incorporated lessons from decades of observation. Even minor adjustments, shaping a hide more efficiently, storing food with improved insulation, interpreting a faint animal trail, reflected the layering of experience. Wisdom was encoded in story, song, gesture, and practice, transmitted not as rigid instruction but as lived understanding. Death and loss continued to shape consciousness. Illness, injury, and the passing of elders were integrated into the communal memory, informing behavior and reinforcing social bonds. Mourning was accompanied by reflection, ethical teaching, and ritual, ensuring that every life, every contribution, and every failure served the dual purpose of honoring the past and preparing the living for future challenges. Life and death existed in continuous interplay, inseparable and instructive. The environment itself became a teacher of unparalleled subtlety. Snow, ice, wind, and wildlife formed an intricate curriculum. Members interpreted wind shifts, snow texture, distant sounds, and movement patterns with extraordinary precision. Even the harshest winters became opportunities for instruction, to anticipate storms, preserve energy, observe predators, and coordinate group movement. Survival had become both art and science, requiring intellect, intuition, and ethical awareness in equal measure. Moments of wonder and reflection persisted. The sun refracted through icicles, painting the cave in shifting mosaics. Herds glided silently across vast snowfields. Storms sculpted ice into ephemeral formations that vanished with the first thaw. These fleeting phenomena reminded the group that life encompassed more than survival. Beauty, reflection, and emotional connection were inseparable from endurance and skill, creating a holistic understanding of existence within the frozen expanse. The cave was no longer merely shelter, it was a living archive, a classroom, a sanctuary, and a moral space. Knowledge, skill, ethics, and philosophy intertwined, shaping each individual and the collective identity. The snowfields, the ice, the wind, and the wildlife were both adversaries and teachers, forging in humans an enduring synthesis of resilience, empathy, wisdom, and understanding. Generations passed, yet the rhythm continued: birth, learning, trial, reflection, death, and renewal. Each cycle layering knowledge and experience, gradually building a civilization in miniature within the frozen wilderness. Over centuries, the cave had transformed into the heart of a living civilization, small yet profound, defined by human endurance, wisdom, and a deep, reciprocal understanding of the frozen world. Generations had come and gone, each contributing knowledge, experience, and insight that shaped both survival strategies and the moral fabric of the group. Every stone arrangement, every repaired hide, and every carving in the walls bore witness to centuries of trials, triumphs, losses, and subtle victories against a world that was indifferent, relentless, and magnificent in its austerity. The youngest generation, born entirely within this ecosystem, possessed instincts honed by inherited wisdom. They moved across snowfields with confidence and caution intertwined, reading the world with almost uncanny precision. Subtle indicators, cracked ice, the scent carried by the wind, the distant shape of migrating herds, were interpreted instinctively. These skills were not taught in formal instruction alone but transmitted through observation, imitation, and ritual, forming a seamless integration of physical, cognitive, and moral understanding. Social structures had reached remarkable complexity. Leadership was distributed and adaptive, blending respect for the aged and experienced with recognition of physical skill and innovative insight. Elders continued to guide, narrate history, and arbitrate conflicts, while young adults executed practical tasks and trained the next generation. Authority was neither imposed nor contested violently. It existed as a reflection of demonstrated competence, ethical behavior, and the ability to maintain cohesion under duress. Mentorship, alliances, and trust networks formed the invisible architecture of social stability, as vital as fire, food, or shelter. Hunting had become both art and science, a combination of intuition, observation, strategy, and cooperative execution. Individuals interpreted subtle snow textures, wind directions, herd movements, and predator behavior. Young hunters experimented under careful supervision, learning to anticipate danger, conserve energy, and coordinate movements. Every hunt was a lesson in ethics as well as skill, taking only what was needed, respecting the balance of life, and maintaining the group's cohesion. The cave echoed with the quiet pride of achievement, shared not for ego but for survival, legacy, and continuity. Rituals and stories had flourished into a rich, symbolic culture. Births, deaths, successful hunts, and first solo excursions were celebrated with intricate ceremonies blending practical instruction, collective memory, and philosophical reflection. Tales of storms survived, ingenious hunts, cunning strategies, and companions lost were narrated with reverence. These narratives imparted lessons about mortality, courage, foresight, and empathy. The young absorbed not just survival techniques but moral frameworks, understanding the interconnectedness of life, the inevitability of death, and the responsibilities owed to kin, community, and nature itself. Philosophical reflection had deepened over the centuries. Elders and adults contemplated impermanence, cycles of life, the meaning of courage, and the responsibilities of existence within an indifferent cosmos. Death was acknowledged, mourned, and integrated into daily consciousness. Life was measured not only by survival but by attentiveness, wisdom, and ethical conduct. Each member, from the youngest to the oldest, understood that their actions had consequences, that observation and understanding of the world were as vital as physical endurance, and that empathy and cooperation were inseparable from survival. Knowledge accumulation had reached an unprecedented scale. Tools were perfected and specialized, shelters optimized for warmth, efficiency, and protection, hunting strategies refined over countless trials. Even minor observations, a shift in wind direction, a subtle change in herd behavior, the sound of cracking ice, were analyzed and transmitted. The cave was a living laboratory, the landscape a teacher, and the group a dynamic repository of adaptive intelligence. Wisdom was codified in story, ritual, practice, and the silent, instinctive understanding shared across generations. Loss and grief continued to shape consciousness. Death, injury, and misfortune were inevitable, yet each event contributed to the collective memory, guiding behavior, and reinforcing trust and empathy. Mourning was integrated with instruction, ensuring that each life, each contribution, and each failure became a lesson, a legacy, and a moral anchor. Life and death existed in perpetual interplay, inseparable, instructive, and sacred. The natural world had become both adversary and teacher. Snow, ice, wind, wildlife, and seasonal cycles were interpreted with extraordinary subtlety. Even extreme winters were occasions for teaching, reflection, and reinforcement of strategy. Knowledge was cumulative, adaptive, and shared, forming a complex web of understanding linking generations across time. Every footstep, glance, and decision resonated with centuries of observation, practice, and refinement. Moments of beauty persisted, quietly sustaining the spirit. Sunlight refracted through icicles, casting ephemeral patterns. Herds moved with grace across frozen plains. Storms sculpted ice into intricate, transient art. These moments were acknowledged, shared, and reflected upon. They reminded the group that life encompassed more than survival. Observation, reflection, empathy, and understanding were equally essential to human existence. Through the centuries, the cave had evolved into a repository of wisdom, skill, tradition, and philosophy. Generations had learned to live, to observe, to adapt, and to reflect. They had become attuned to the rhythms of the frozen world, integrating practical skill with moral and philosophical understanding. Survival was inseparable from empathy, observation, wisdom, and cooperation. Every generation built upon the last, creating a continuum of resilience, understanding, and reverence for life in a world both beautiful and brutal. Over centuries, the cave became not merely a shelter but a monumental chronicle of human endeavor, a living archive of intelligence, skill, and philosophy. Each generation added layers to this repository, innovations in hunting, subtle improvements in toolmaking, refinements in shelter construction, and the accumulated wisdom of survival. The walls bore silent testimony to countless winters, blizzards, hunts, and rituals. Every scratch, arrangement of stones, and repaired hide was a marker of memory, a symbol of endurance, and a guide for the generations that followed. The youngest members of the group were born into a world where survival knowledge was both inherited and observed. Their education was immersive and instinctual. Every movement, glance, or observation was part of a larger lesson. They learned to read the texture of snow, the shift of wind, the faintest sounds of animals over miles, and the subtle signals of companions. These skills were honed not through formal instruction but through daily immersion, observation, imitation, and ritual. They became an intrinsic part of the cave's living intelligence. Social complexity had deepened. Leadership was situational and merit-based. Elders provided guidance in ethics, strategy, and knowledge. Young adults contributed physical skill, innovation, and agility. Alliances, mentorships, and implicit networks of trust governed cooperation, ensuring the group's cohesion. Authority was rarely asserted by force. It existed as recognition of competence, wisdom, and the ability to preserve both life and social balance. Emotional intelligence became as vital as physical capability. Navigating human relationships was inseparable from navigating the wilderness. Hunting had evolved into a science of observation, prediction, and coordination. Each member interpreted subtle cues, snow compressions, wind shifts, animal behaviors, distant silhouettes. Groups coordinated ambushes across frozen expanses, conserving energy while maximizing success. Young hunters were trained meticulously, learning to anticipate prey, avoid predators, and optimize strategies. Each hunt carried moral weight, taking only what was necessary, respecting life, and maintaining balance with the environment. Failures were dissected as lessons. Successes became stories, songs, and rituals, reinforcing cohesion and wisdom. Rituals flourished as instruments of memory and identity. Births, deaths, and major hunts were marked with ceremonies blending instruction, storytelling, and reflection. Legends of past storms, cunning hunts, lost companions, and near escapes conveyed survival knowledge, ethical guidance, and philosophical insight. Children internalized these narratives, shaping their understanding of morality, responsibility, courage, and the interdependence of life. The cave became both classroom and temple, where practical and ethical lessons merged seamlessly. Philosophy deepened with centuries. Elders reflected on impermanence, mortality, and human agency within an indifferent cosmos. Adults meditated on courage, foresight, and responsibility to kin, community, and environment. Life was evaluated not merely in survival but in attentiveness, understanding, and ethical action. Young members observed, reflected, and internalized these patterns, understanding that intellect, empathy, and cooperation were inseparable from physical endurance. Death was recognized as inevitable, yet life was celebrated in care, observation, and shared effort. Knowledge accumulation reached extraordinary levels. Tools became specialized, hunting techniques optimized, shelters engineered for warmth, efficiency, and safety. Every observation of environment, animal behavior, or weather pattern was recorded in practice, story, and ritual. Knowledge existed both as instinct and conscious reflection, forming a complex web linking generations. Even minor adaptations, a more efficient fire arrangement, a sharper spearhead, or a subtle tracking technique, embodied centuries of insight. Loss and grief were woven into daily life. Death, illness, and injury were inevitable, yet every event contributed to collective memory, informing decisions, refining ethics, and reinforcing social bonds. Mourning was instructive as well as emotional, embedding lessons for the young while honoring the departed. Life and death were inseparable, continuous, and deeply instructive, forming the moral and practical foundation of existence in the frozen wilderness. The natural world itself became an elaborate teacher. Snow, ice, wind, and wildlife offered lessons in observation, strategy, and respect. Even the harshest storms were opportunities to refine techniques, strengthen cooperation, and transmit knowledge. Every step, glance, and decision resonated with centuries of accumulated wisdom, blending instinct with reflective understanding. The cave's inhabitants became attuned to rhythms imperceptible to the untrained eye, harmonizing with the environment in ways that balanced survival, morality, and insight. Moments of beauty persisted, vital and sustaining. Sunlight fractured through ice, casting shimmering patterns across walls. Herds moved gracefully across vast snowfields. Storms carved ephemeral landscapes in snow and ice. These phenomena were observed, remembered, and shared, reinforcing wonder, humility, and the understanding that life encompassed more than mere survival. Observation, reflection, and emotional connection became as essential as skill, strength, and strategy. Through centuries, the cave evolved into a crucible of civilization in miniature. Every generation built upon the last, integrating skill, observation, philosophy, ritual, and ethical understanding into a cohesive, adaptive culture. Survival was inseparable from empathy, cooperation, reflection, and knowledge. Life within the cave was simultaneously practical, intellectual, and spiritual, a living testament to human resilience against the vast, indifferent, frozen world. As the centuries unfolded, the cave, once a simple shelter against snow and wind, had become the epicenter of a living chronicle, a repository of memory, skill, philosophy, and the unbroken thread of human resilience. Generations had risen and fallen, each leaving their imprint in the walls, in the stories whispered by the fire, and in the subtle gestures of daily life. The passage of time was measured not by hours or years, but by the layering of experience, by the cyclical rhythms of survival, and by the continuity of knowledge transmitted across centuries. The youngest members, born into this vast inheritance, moved with an instinctual awareness of the environment. Every ridge, drift, and shadow carried meaning. They read the snow as an open book, the wind as a signal, and the behavior of prey and predators as lessons in patience, observation, and strategy. Yet they also inherited the deeper, invisible curriculum, the understanding that survival was inseparable from empathy, cooperation, and reflection. They grasped that each act, whether tending a fire, repairing a hide, or assisting a companion, was part of a continuum, linking past, present, and future. The elders, whose faces were mapped with decades of storms and experience, continued to guide, narrate, and reflect. They embodied the accumulated wisdom of countless winters, instructing not only in practical skill but in the moral and philosophical rhythms of life. The young learned to honor life and death, to celebrate both survival and the inevitability of loss. Mourning and celebration were intertwined, ritual and reflection inseparable. Life was understood as a delicate balance, a dialogue with nature, mortality, and the collective consciousness of the group. Hunting and survival had become refined arts. Each movement across the frozen expanse, each tracking of prey, and each collaboration in strategy represented centuries of learned observation, trial, and refinement. Young hunters carried within them the legacy of every misstep and triumph that had preceded them. They understood that skill without empathy was hollow, and courage without foresight was perilous. Success and failure were integrated into stories, songs, and rituals, teaching both practical survival and ethical responsibility. The cave itself had transformed into a sanctuary, a classroom, and a library of human resilience. Every repaired hide, every carefully arranged fire, every carved mark on the wall told a story. The environment, harsh, indifferent, yet profoundly instructive, had shaped not only physical endurance but moral awareness and philosophical reflection. Snow, ice, wind, and wildlife were teachers as much as challenges, offering constant lessons in adaptation, observation, and humility. Moments of beauty endured as a sustaining force. Sunlight refracted through icicles, painting ephemeral mosaics across walls. herds moved silently across distant plains. Storms sculpted ice into transient masterpieces. These glimpses of wonder reminded the inhabitants that life was more than survival. It was reflection, connection, and appreciation for the delicate balance of existence. Every observation reinforced the understanding that the human experience was inseparable from the natural world, that beauty, danger, and wisdom coexisted inseparably. Through the unbroken rhythm of births, growth, hunting, reflection, mourning, and renewal, the generations had cultivated a civilization in miniature. Knowledge, skill, empathy, philosophy, and tradition were inseparable threads woven into the fabric of daily life. The cave had become a living chronicle of endurance, a testament to humanity's capacity to observe, reflect, adapt, and thrive even in the harshest conditions. And in the quiet moments, when snow whispered against the cave's entrance, when the wind sang over frozen plains, and when the fire flickered across the faces of the young and old alike, the truth became clear. Survival was not merely about resisting nature, but about understanding it, not merely about enduring time, but about weaving meaning into its passage. The generations that had come and gone had created more than a lineage of survival. They had cultivated a legacy of wisdom, reflection, and reverence for life, echoing in the cave for centuries and beyond, a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity.